Our next unit is going to be about world populations. This is Unit 3. Some of the topics that we will be discussing are population growth and decline statistics. We're going to actually talk intensively about statistics, research them, find out what those statistics tell us about different countries. We're going to talk about human migration, whether it be internal migration or external migration from one country to another. We're going to do something called population pyramids. These are another type of graph that maybe you've heard about, maybe not. We're going to analyze them, see what trends have happened within pyramids over time in different countries. And again, these are a type of graph, not a physical pyramid. Overpopulation and the problems that come with that and the things that should be looked into with regards to overpopulation. And then population distribution around the world. Where are people settling around the world? Where have they settled in recent history, and where might they be going? Some of the objectives in the beginning part of our lessons are going to be to understand how land, population, and wealth are all distributed around the world, and then reflect on that as well. We're actually going to do an in-class simulation about how land, population, and wealth are distributed around the world. Just for fun, you can actually Google search a world population clock, and right now you can see that the population of the world is approaching 7.4 billion people as of October 27, 2018. You can also do research on the population of the United States, and there's a population clock that's continuously going, so you can Google search that, take a minute and go and find those as well. All the way back in October of 2011, this was one headline that came out: room for one more, world population to reach 7 billion in the next few days. So, just 7 years ago, we were approaching 7 billion people. Now we're on our way to 7.4 billion. And you can see here, children most likely to be born in Asia Pacific region, fears over pressure on food supply and medical care, because with a growing population, there are concerns that do come with that. So why do we need to study populations? Why are we doing a study of populations in geography, and what does that have to do with even our Christian faith? Well, before I say that, I'd like you to understand how populations around the world have grown in the last century. There has been exponential growth around the world within the last 2 centuries, however, since around 1830. They're producing something, when you go to graph them, they're producing something called a J-curve. Whenever you have exponential number sequences that the exponent is growing, it will produce a classical J-curve. And this is how the world population has been growing within the last 2 centuries. If you'll notice and look here, this is a chart that shows 2 different types of groups. First of all, developing regions around the world. So a developing region, this light yellow color, a developing region is one that maybe has not put on manufacturing or industrial growth yet. They are still working agrarian jobs. A lot of these are farming industries. You'll notice that that is the population that is growing exponentially, this J-curve. If you trace it back, it starts around the middle of the 1800s, and then by 1950 we see a sharp incline. This line down here shows industrialized regions. You can see that over time they have grown, but at a much slower pace. So why since 1830? Well, since 1830 there have been tremendous advances in medicine and in agriculture. This has resulted in an unprecedented population explosion. First of all, through medicine, people are living longer. Through better agricultural practices, people are able to produce more and therefore feed more people. And because of that, people are willing to have more children around the world. They need more children to work their farms, etc. So we'll see some trends that happened. And again, we want to look at the difference between a developing region and an industrialized region. We would be considered more of an industrialized region, even though we don't have a lot of manufacturing in the United States. We are more of an advanced country. We are more of what we call a developed country, not developing. This is again, graphing about the world's population in the 7 most populous countries around the world. You'll notice again, the shape of the J curve. So the overall world population has increased. If you'll see, in 2011, China was the top country with the most population, 1.3 billion people. It is still at the top today. India falls behind it, and then the United States was the third. And of course, this is a drastic difference between these two here. So top two that really have a majority of the nations or of the world's populations are China and India. However, by 2050, it is predicted that India will be moving forward. Now, if you're not familiar with China's history, in the 1960s, there was a movement to decrease the population of China. So they enacted what was called the one-child policy. And in recent decades, you were not allowed to have more than one child, or else you were criticized, punished, even taxed at a higher rate. And so people in China began to limit their families, and we have seen a slow, because of that policy, we've seen a slow within China's population. Now, in recent news, since 2011, China has actually changed their one-child policy. They've enacted a bill that said that if you come from a family, if you and your spouse both are from a one-child family, then you can actually have more than one child. And they've limited it to two still. But you can read a little bit more about that. That's also something that some people choose to do for their research paper. So if that seems interesting to you and you would like to study the population laws in China and determine whether or not you'd like to take a position on that, you can research that a little bit more. But you can see some of the changes that are predicted by 2050. And again, statisticians, demographers, they can do a study of countries, see where their populations are, what age groups their populations are in today. We're going to be looking at that through our population pyramid, and they can make predictions for the future as well. Here's another kind of graphing ability for you to see the total population in millions, the growth between 2005 and 2010. The size of the bubble is the number of people. So you can automatically see here, Asia has one of the highest populations. And then the plus 1.1% is the growth rate that they are moving at. So you can kind of gain some understanding. Africa is growing at its fastest. The Arab states, like the Middle East, they're growing next. Europe is almost at a stalemate, so they are neither growing or declining. And there's some things here that you can look at in regards to the world population growth, just in a graphic form here. So again, let's go back to this question, why should we study populations? And in John 3:16, a verse that's probably very familiar with you, or to you, for God so loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, so that anyone who believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Populations aren't just the number of people in a country. The population, we can look at it this way as Christians. Every single person is someone for whom Christ has died. And because of that, we need to know about those people. This goes together with our understanding of units 1 and 2. This connects very strongly with those two, right? When we talk about global stewardship and the idea that we are to care for the earth that God has given to us, and that includes the people that he's placed on the earth. When we talk about physical geography, we need to know about where these people are living and what is available for them to be able to survive and thrive and be able to glorify and please God. So again, population, if we looked at the dictionary definition, would be a number of people in a given area. But as Christians, we also need to look at each and every population statistic as the number of people Christ died for. So our first reason that we study populations as Christians is because, number one, we love God. In Colossians 1:16, it says, for the love of God is the one that brings us to wanting to find out more about the populations around the world. You can take a moment and look up Colossians 1:16 and write down a couple of phrases from Colossians 1:16. We also study populations because we are commanded to love our neighbor. In Matthew 22:36, this is the verse we get that talks about to love our neighbors as ourselves. Again, you can take a moment, pause the video, and write down a phrase or two about Matthew 22:36. God commanded us that if we are to be in this world, we are to love the people around us. Now, this can include, obviously, the picture here. You have a neighbor sitting across the row from you. You are to love them as yourselves. We also live in communities where we are to love the people across the street from us, no matter what they do to us, no matter how they might treat us. We are to reach out and show them love. But this also, on a global perspective, we are to love the people that are neighbors to us, and we are all living on this earth together. We are all neighbors and citizens of this world. And then the last reason is for global stewardship. So I don't have this slide here, but number 3 is the idea of global stewardship. Now in Genesis 1, we are commanded to take care of the world that God has created. So if you'll add number 3 here, number 3 is that idea of global stewardship, that God has given us a mandate to care for and rule over and be good stewards of the creation that He has made for us. So be sure to review these 3 reasons. Make sure that you can look into these different verses and have an understanding of what each one means and says, and that you have a position that you could take on why we study population statistics.